Hey, I am Ryan Paneer with Ironwood Outfit, and you know what YouTube needs? Yeah, another floating shelf video. Okay, look, I know there are 1,000, if not more than 1,000, floating shelf videos on YouTube. But most of them show you how to make one or two little shelves inside of a bathroom or something. This is for a larger job. There will be 5 7-foot shelves in a room with a 10-foot ceiling. So we're gonna show kind of what it's like to batch out a bunch of these. So I'm gonna pull all the staples out. I will walk you through step by step. Now the frame or the core or the skeleton, whatever you wanna call it, is really easy. There's a little trick that I'll show you in a second. Right now, these things are gonna be 7 feet long, but the box or the case that's gonna be over the top of them is 3/4 inch stock. So I gotta subtract 1.5 inches. Now the frame of this, it's gonna have supports that come out like this, and then the box that slides over it. However, what no one seems to talk about is something that is really helpful, is marking the stud location on here first, so that when you go to mount it, you don't have these in the position that where the stud's gonna be, and that's where you wanna put a screw, so you have to skip one. And on a 7-foot shelf, a shelf this big, you kinda want as much support as possible. Where I'm going, it is 3 inches to the left of the center line. That's where the stud location is. So from there, all we have to do is mark 16 on center everywhere. The more you mark now, the easier things are in the long run. This is why marking out stud location is so important. I didn't know if it was going to come up, but it really did perfectly. So this is how they'd be laid out. Basically you have one on each corner, then you just put one in the middle. The problem is, the middle of this section here, way too close to that stud location. When it comes time to mount it, I hit this thing like crazy. I can't mount this thing. So because I located it first and know exactly where the studs are gonna be, I can slide this piece over, give myself plenty of clearance on this stud, and it makes life a whole lot easier. Again, it's not the end of the world, but I wanna hit every stud that I can so that these can support as much weight as possible. So I did every single one that I realized the last one I did upside down. It was the thing I was trying to avoid the entire time. And sure enough, I mean, those look kind of like the middle, right? I don't know, whatever. People make mistakes. I'll explain more in a second, but because I'm using this old miter saw, you can see here none of the joints line up well. Okay, so truth be told, it's been 3 days since I worked on the shelves. You saw me using this thing. It's an old Porter cable. Every single adjustment is totally out of square, and not by a little bit. And I know you can kind of adjust the fences, but it's totally pointless. And the reason it's been 3 days since I worked on anything is because Amazon has 2-day shipping. Don't judge me. So if you didn't know, these pins and brads alike have a little bevel. Why am I showing it to you? There's no way you're able to see that. There's just tiny pins. Anyway, now sometimes you'll see them ricochet off. Earlier I actually shot myself. Oh, got shot with a nail. Which means they ricochet left to right if you're holding the gun straight. That means if I'm shooting into a thin 3/4 inch piece like this, if I put it sideways, which is the easiest way to nail it on edge like that, it's easily gonna shoot in or out, so it doesn't work. So shooting it like this means when it deflects either left or right with these 23 gauge pins, it deflects like crazy. It still goes into the material, you don't have to worry about it. As I'm finishing up assembly and sanding, I want to thank everyone, as always, for watching. I haven't been able to post nearly as many videos as I'd like lately, but I have some really cool plans for the channel coming up. So stay tuned, subscribe if you haven't already. I should have a really cool shop tour in the next probably month or so that highlights some really cool stuff like the dust manifold and the assembly table and some other things. So thanks for all your support and patience. The more you like, comment, share, and subscribe, the more of these videos I can put out. I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy the rest. Okay, we're almost done with sanding. I went up to about 120. I'm gonna go to 180 or 220, but before we do the last grit, I wanted to show you a little trick. There's a couple of little gaps, like where the miters don't quite match up. Not that any of us ever make that mistake. I brought you in close and I thought it would be good to start off with the largest gap. This is, I mean, it's probably not a 1/16 of an inch, but I mean, that is a pretty substantial gap. And now you do this before the final sanding, just because you're gonna probably have to sand a little bit of glue off. Take some glue, squeeze it into there, and you kind of force it in with your finger. Then I use a burnisher. This is to burnish card scrapers. You can use the end of a screwdriver, you can use anything, but all you do is bend the fibers down like this. You just start squeezing it in. You work from both sides. So you burnish this side down, you burnish this side back into it, and before you know it, there is no gap anymore. Especially with soft woods, this works phenomenally well. And now for the finish, I'm just using a thick umber dye diluted with mineral spirits. It's one of the absolute easiest things I've ever used. You just flood it on and wipe it off, and it looks absolutely great.
I'm using an HVLP sprayer and pre-catalyzed lacquer. Then I touch sand everything with 320, spray a second and third coat, and I always end with a non-scratch Scotch-Brite pad. That honestly took me 3 takes to say correctly, by the way. It is a serious tongue twister. Anyway, this knocks down any high spots or dust that settles in the finish, but doesn't really dull hardly at all. And it leaves everything silky smooth. All that's left now is the install, which is always the best and worst part of a job. I love that it's almost over, but it's a little annoying in someone else's home if something goes wrong. But planning ahead by locating the studs and thinking through everything ahead of time made for a pretty short and easy install. The only change I made is that I used 4 shelves instead of 5, so it didn't look quite so crowded, and I installed the last shelf in their breakfast nook. So I will leave you with that and the final reveal. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you next time.